He slid the check for $15,000 toward me like it was a gift, like my worth could be printed on paper. And in that moment I finally understood what they thought of me. I didn't touch it. Patrick kept his hand on the envelope a second too long, waiting for gratitude. Emily watched me like she was witnessing a lesson being taught. Grace looked away, as if watching would make her guilty too. Everything in the room felt rehearsed, like this humiliation had been planned. The sale was done, the money was split, the story was finalized, according to them. And I was expected to nod, accept, and disappear. But I stayed still and everything broke open. Patrick leaned back in his chair and forced a casual tone. "It's 15,000. Your share." He said share, the same way you talk to a child after turning off a game console. Firm, final, not open to debate. I kept my voice level. "That's what you decided?" Emily scoffed immediately. "What else did you think you deserved?" There was venom in her smile, the kind people wear when they want you to know you're beneath them. Grace sat frozen. She didn't defend me. Not once. Patrick pushed the envelope a little closer. "Come on, Mike. Don't make this weird. We're trying to be generous." "Generous," I repeated, letting the word hang in the air. He pointed at the envelope as if that settled everything. The house sold for $690,000. We paid the mortgage, the taxes, every renovation, every upgrade. So after we ran the numbers, objectively, your portion came out to this. Emily added, "Honestly, I told him you didn't deserve that much." She smiled like she expected applause. I looked at Grace because once upon a time her eyes used to tell the truth when everyone else lied. But she stared at the floor. Cowardice can look a lot like silence. Patrick crossed his arms. "Say something." So I did. Calmly. "In your spreadsheet, what did you list for the down payment?" He frowned, irritated. "Why are you asking that? Just answer." He sighed. 45,000. "And who paid it?" I asked. Patrick's jaw twitched. "You did. In 2014. But that doesn't mean you get half the profit." "I never asked for half," I said. "I didn't ask for anything." That changed the temperature of the room more than a raised voice ever could. Emily jumped back in. "You've been entitled about this whole thing, acting like the world owes you something. Patrick and I worked for everything we have." I didn't argue. There was no point. I just watched her talk, watched her need me to be lesser so she could feel larger. Grace whispered, "Mike, please just take it. We don't want conflict." Conflict. That word hit harder than the number on the check. They saw my dignity as danger. My silence as a threat. I stood up slowly. The chair scraped the floor like it was protesting. Patrick stiffened. "If you walk out without that envelope, don't come back later expecting more. This is final." "I heard you," I said. Grace finally looked at me, not with love, not with apology, but with fear that I might ruin their peace. She wasn't afraid of what they'd done to me. She was afraid of what I'd do about it. Patrick pressed harder. "We're family. We don't want bitterness between us." I nodded once. "Then you shouldn't have treated me like a charity case." Emily snorted. "Oh please. You are lucky we included you at all." That was the last sentence she ever said to me in that house. I walked toward the door. I didn't touch the envelope. Didn't raise my voice. Didn't give them the satisfaction of anger. Patrick called after me, desperate to own the ending. "Appreciate what people do for you." I paused with my hand on the doorknob, not theatrical, not dramatic, just long enough for honesty. "I always appreciate what people do for me," I said. "And I never forget what they take." Then I stepped outside. The cool air hit my face and I could hear their muffled arguing through the door, not about what they'd done but about why I didn't accept it. They thought that leaving without the check made me defeated. But as I walked to my car, one truth settled in my chest like steel. They weren't closing a chapter. They were opening a reckoning. The porch light behind me shut off as I reached the edge of the driveway. I heard the click of the switch, intentional, sharp, dismissive. That was their final message: "You're not welcome back." I stood there for a moment, watching my breath fog in the cold night air. I didn't feel angry. I felt emptied, almost weightless. I pulled my keys from my pocket and for a second I just stared at them. 45,000, I whispered to myself. That was love. That was history. My voice cracked, but only I heard it. I unlocked the truck door, slid in and shut it quietly. The silence inside the cab wrapped around me like insulation. The dashboard clock glowed 9:42 p.m. For some reason, that time would stay burned into me, the minute I stopped being blind. The engine started. The headlights swept across the front of the house I once believed was the future. I didn't look at the windows, didn't want to see silhouettes or curious faces. I just shifted into drive and headed toward the open road. A memory hit before I even reached the end of the street. Patrick at 16, leaning against the half-built porch railing, laughing as sawdust stuck to his hair. Dad, I'm gonna build something like this one day, a house, a family. And you're going to live right next door. That boy felt like a ghost now. The road stretched out ahead of me, dark and empty. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't need noise. I needed clarity. And clarity came slowly, one truth at a time. You don't get betrayed by enemies. You only get betrayed by the people you protect. Somewhere between their house and the dimly lit gas station on Ridgeway Road, my mind drifted back decades. Not because I wanted to remember, but because memories come when the heart is wounded. I heard Laura's voice again. This house won't always be perfect, Michael, but it will be ours. And it had been. For years. Before upgrades and spreadsheets and market value turned love into numbers. I pulled into an empty spot at the gas station and turned the engine off. The parking lot lights buzzed overhead. I rested my forehead on the steering wheel. $15,000. A payoff disguised as generosity. A price tag on a lifetime. Then quietly I said out loud, when did I teach him that dignity was disposable? There was no answer. I leaned back, rubbed my face and breathed, slow, steady, controlled. And as the sting softened, something unexpected pushed through the ache. Not rage. Not revenge. Reflection. Because the truth is, my life didn't begin with tonight. It didn't begin with betrayal. It began with love. I thought back to the early days again, to Laura's laughter, to small paychecks turned into big sacrifices, to working overtime so Patrick would never feel the insecurity I grew up with. I remembered one night in particular. Patrick was 12, struggling in school, scared to admit he felt stupid in math class. I sat at the kitchen table with him until midnight, drawing shapes and using wood-cutting angles to explain algebra. He looked at me and said, "You always make everything make sense." I smiled now, the memory warm but tinged with loss. I used to be his answer. Somewhere along the way I became his obstacle. My phone vibrated suddenly in the cup holder. Incoming call, Richard Barnes. I stared at the screen. I hadn't spoken to Richard in months. Strange timing. I almost didn't pick up, but something made me swipe the green button. Mike? Sorry to call late. His tone was casual, unaware of anything that had just happened. Nah, it's fine, I said, steadying my voice. What's up? Just wanted to check in, he replied. You haven't swung by the office lately. Thought maybe you retired on me. I chuckled softly despite everything. Not yet. Still swinging hammers. Well, good, he said. You stop building things and the world falls apart. He paused. You all right? You sound tired. For a moment I considered telling him everything. Every detail. Every wound. But the instinct I'd lived my whole life with kicked in. Take care of yourself silently. Long day, I told him. He didn't push. If you need a distraction, the guys and I are grabbing dinner Saturday. No business talk for once. Come if you're free. I'll think about it. Before hanging up, he added, remember, if you ever need anything, I'm around. It wasn't a lifeline yet. Just a normal conversation with a friend. No foreshadowing. No plan. Life hadn't turned sharp enough for that. I ended the call and sat back again, eyes unfocused. There was something about that invitation, ordinary, honest, that stung. A simple offer from someone who respected me. On the same night my own son priced me at $15,000. I drove home around 11 p.m. My small rental looked dim and lonely, but at least it didn't pretend to love me. I unlocked the door, hung my jacket, and turned on the kitchen light. The room smelled faintly of sawdust and coffee, a comforting mix. I put water on the stove for tea. Ritual over ruin. As it heated, I grabbed the photo off the refrigerator, the one of Laura and me in front of the old house before it was finished. She had her hair in a messy bun and I had paint in my beard. Patrick wasn't even born yet. "You tell me to breathe," I murmured to her. The kettle whistled softly. I poured the water, sat at the table and wrapped my hands around the mug to warm them. No anger. No crying. Just the slow realization that the love I built my life on had not been shared equally. And maybe, just maybe, the moment I walked away from that envelope wasn't the end. Maybe it was the beginning of remembering my own worth. I didn't go back to the house for 2 weeks after the night of the check. Not out of spite, I just needed space to hear myself think. When love shatters, the noise takes a while to settle. Then one Sunday afternoon, Patrick called. "Dad, can you come over? Grace is making roast. We haven't seen you in a while." He sounded cheerful. Normal. Like nothing had ever happened. And maybe that was the first sign, the pretense, the performance. But I agreed. I've never been one to avoid difficult rooms. Sometimes dignity means walking into the fire calmly. When I arrived, the table was already set. White plates, wine glasses, cloth napkins folded into roses. Grace had gone all out. Except it wasn't for me. Her parents were there too, along with her sister and her brother-in-law, Ethan. I didn't know they were invited. "Oh," Grace said with exaggerated surprise. "Michael made it." Her mother leaned in and kissed my cheek politely. Her father shook my hand. But something was territorial in the air, stiff smiles, too much friendliness. I took my seat beside Ethan and he whispered, "Good to see you, man." The only genuine greeting at the table. As soon as we started eating, the covert insults began. Cloaked in politeness. Delivered with forks and smiles. Grace's mother asked, "So, Michael, are you still working with wood?" Still, as if it were a child's hobby. "Yes, ma'am," I replied calmly. "Carpentry's treated me well all my life." Emily, always hungry for an audience, jumped in. "Patrick and I were actually just talking about how different our generations are. You know, some people think loyalty to a company pays off, but the modern world doesn't really reward, she paused as if searching for the word. "Labor jobs." The table chuckled, except for Ethan and me. Patrick sipped his wine and added, "We want Dad to start relaxing. He works too hard for his age." His age. There it was, spoken softly, disguised as concern. I took a bite of my food. Slowly. "I enjoy my work," I said. "I like building things that last." Emily smiled with teeth. "Of course. It's just, you don't want to become a burden later." Grace didn't correct her. Grace didn't correct a single thing. Her father cleared his throat. "Well, you're lucky to have Patrick and Grace. They're very responsible with their finances. Smart decisions all around." I knew exactly what they thought they were praising, selling the house. Patrick leaned back, soaking it in. "We're planning ahead. We don't have time to take care of someone who didn't." The table froze for half a second, just long enough to register the brutality beneath his tone. But then everyone pretended they didn't hear it. I reached for my water. My hand didn't shake. "Proud of you both," I said. They didn't know what to do with calm. Dinner continued like that. Mockery disguised as conversation, belittling disguised as jokes. They weren't teasing me. They were erasing me. Ethan tried to redirect the energy a few times. "So, Michael, you doing any projects these days? What's your favorite thing you ever built? Think you'll ever teach carpentry?" Kind questions. But each time he asked, someone cut him off with a louder, shinier topic. Stocks, escrow, vacation rentals, interest rates. It was a coordinated erasure disguised as modern success. Not once did Patrick ask how I was. Not once did Grace ask if I was eating well or sleeping well. I could have been a distant relative, not the man who raised him alone. But the worst moment came just before dessert. Grace slid her phone across the table to her sister. "Look, the real estate agent says it was smart we sold when we did." They scrolled through messages and laughed, oblivious. Ethan leaned toward me and quietly asked, "Did you agree to sell?" I didn't answer him directly. I just said, I was informed. He sat up straighter, jaw tense. He saw the truth. When dessert was served, the performative kindness returned. Compliments. Toasts. Jokes. I played along. I've had years of practice holding dignity like a shield. As we stood to leave, Grace hugged me and whispered, sweet voice, sweet tone, poison underneath, you really should accept that money. You're making things harder than they need to be. I looked her in the eyes. I don't measure family in dollars. She pulled back as if I'd slapped her. Patrick walked me to the door, arms crossed. Dad, you have to let go of the past. The house was never your future. Our life has moved forward. I nodded. I see that. It doesn't mean we don't care. I didn't respond. He waited for me to argue. When I didn't, he opened the door. See you soon? I gave him a polite smile. Good night, Patrick. I drove home, the silence louder than any argument. The exclusions became subtle at first. Home remodeling updates stopped being shared. Family photos stopped including me. Social invitations dried up, replaced with a pattern of accidental omissions. Oh, did you want to come? Oh, sorry, we thought it would be boring for you. Oh, we assumed you'd be tired. Age packaged as irrelevance. Financial decisions that were once discussed openly became secretive. Grace started using words like our equity, our investment, our house appreciation. Patrick followed her lead. They weren't just closing me out, they were rewriting history. One afternoon I stopped by with dessert, just trying to keep a family rhythm alive. I walked in through the unlocked side gate and froze. Two realtors stood in the living room. Clipboards, laser measure, plastic shoe covers. They were appraising the house. No one had told me. Grace noticed me first, startled. Oh, Michael. Didn't know you were coming. Patrick looked caught off guard. Dad. Hey. The realtor smiled politely. You must be the previous owner. Beautiful property. And this part of town is hitting record values. I nodded. I imagine it is. Patrick stepped closer, lowering his voice. Dad, we wanted to tell you, we're just getting an estimate. Not making decisions. Not making decisions. The same tone a teenager uses when they already bought the car. I stood beside the fireplace mantel I built for Laura. I could still see the faint scratch marks from the night we brought Patrick home from the hospital and she kicked the baby carrier by accident while laughing. The realtors walked past, measuring everything I once thought would hold my family together. Dad, you're being weird, Patrick whispered sharply. You're acting like this place belongs to you. I turned to him, steady. I'm not acting. I'm observing. What's that supposed to mean? It means I don't interrupt people who are showing me who they've become. Grace tossed her hands in the air. See, Patrick? This is what I mean. He creates drama out of nothing. I set the dessert on the counter. I'll leave you to it. I walked out without another word. I didn't slam the door. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't ask for explanations or apologies. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is give people space to expose themselves fully. And they weren't done. Not even close. I stopped going to the house for a while after the realtor's incident. Not out of surrender, out of observation. If a storm is forming, you don't shout at the clouds. You watch the wind. Then one Tuesday afternoon, I got a text from Patrick. If you're passing by, can you grab the drill set from the garage? Need it for the deck later. A simple request, normal, harmless. I didn't read too much into it. I drove over near dusk. The neighborhood was quiet, the kind of suburban calm that hides dysfunction well. Their cars weren't in the driveway. Good. I preferred silence. I walked through the side gate and into the garage. The drill set was right where I left it months ago, labeled, cleaned, organized. I put it in the truck, but something nudged me to go inside, not suspicion, just a faint, uneasy instinct. The back door was unlocked. Inside, the house looked staged, spotless counters, scented candles, not a misplaced object in sight. Too perfect. Too prepared. I moved slowly, not snooping, just noticing. Then I saw it, a stack of papers on the kitchen island, weighed down by a ceramic bowl to keep them from sliding. I wasn't looking for anything, but the first page on top had one line that froze me. Final distribution of proceeds, $690,000. Followed by Patrick and Emily's signatures. And a third signature, the buyer's. But nowhere was my name. I lifted the first sheet, carefully. Under it were printed emails. The headers glared. Regarding transfer of title, ensure previous owner does not retain claim. We prefer to avoid discussion with the father to prevent emotional issues. He believes the house was intended as inheritance. Avoid giving him access to documents until signing. They called me the father. Not Dad. Not Michael. The father, an obstacle, not a human. I kept reading. We confirmed the property was gifted, so verbal understandings are irrelevant. Please finalize the deed transfer before informing family members. Finalized. Without me. Without a conversation. Without dignity. The printed emails weren't even hidden, just stacked neatly, confidently, as if no one would ever question them. That level of certainty wasn't an accident. Betrayal that bold as premeditated. Still, no anger came. Just a deep, hollow stillness. I turned another page and found the closing packet, with a copy of the deed, the updated title. Owner of record, Patrick Reynolds and Emily Reynolds. Sole property. No third-party interest. My contribution, erased. My history, deleted. My wife's dream, reproposed. But my body didn't move. My breathing didn't change. If someone had walked in right then, they would have thought I was reading a grocery list. After a long moment, I stacked every page back in the exact order I found them, aligned the corners, slid the bowl back on top, and smoothed the counter with my palm. No trace that I ever touched anything. Then I walked to the hall closet, our old utility cabinet, and opened it. Nothing inside but light bulbs and cleaning supplies. But I stood there anyway. Because that was the last place Laura and I had kept the original deed. Back when we bought the house, before renovations, before Patrick and Grace, before everything else. The space was empty now, physically and symbolically. I closed the door. I didn't cry. I didn't break. Grief sometimes looks like silence. When I stepped outside, the evening air was cold enough to sting. I locked the back door behind me and walked to my truck with even steps. Not one object in my hands. Not even the drill set anymore. I left it sitting on the back porch. I didn't want to fix anything there again. The next morning, I called Richard Barnes. "Mike," he answered, sounding pleasantly surprised. "Long time. You still doing that friends rate thing?" I asked lightly. "For you? Always. What's going on?" "Need to ask a legal question. Hypothetical." He chuckled. "Those are usually the most real." We met at his office that afternoon. I showed him nothing from the house, no emails, no paperwork. I simply explained. I gave my son the house years ago. No contract. No written stipulations. Just trust. They sold it. Without telling me. Richard leaned back in his chair and asked one question. "Did you ever sign anything transferring your ownership when you originally gave it to them?" No, the word sat heavily on the desk between us. His face didn't show victory or pity, just clarity. "Then you didn't give them the house. You gave them the right to live in it. The deed remains the law unless you legally relinquish it. If your name was on that deed originally, you were owed consent. And you were owed disclosure. So I have a case." "Oh, you have more than a case." Richard opened a cabinet, took out a file, and slid it toward me. "But before we go nuclear, there's something else you should know." I frowned. "What's that?" "Laura set up an inheritance. Did you ever finish the estate transfer?" My heartbeat paused. I thought everything went to the medical bills. "Not everything," he said gently. "Your wife owned 3 commercial lots off Highway 37. She left them to you. They were never liquidated." My jaw didn't drop. I didn't shout. But if emotion had weight, the entire building shifted. Laura, even in death, had left security. "How much are they worth?" I asked, though my voice didn't sound like mine. "Conservatively? Around $1.4 million. Plus rental potential. And more importantly, he paused, they're under your name alone. No one else has claim. I exhaled slowly, head down. So while I was worrying about them stealing from me, I already had more than they ever imagined. Richard softened his tone. Don't make your next steps emotional. Make them intentional. I intend to, I replied. He nodded. Then call me when you're ready. I shook his hand, walked out to the parking lot, and sat in my truck with the engine off. For the first time in months, I didn't feel small. Not because of the money. Because the truth finally shifted the balance. They took from me thinking I had nothing left. But they didn't know what, or who, I still had behind me. That night, I didn't tell anyone. I didn't rush to confront them, or threaten, or gloat. Justice isn't loud. It's patient. I sat at my kitchen table and wrote 3 things on a notepad. Don't warn them. Let their behavior continue unchecked. When the time comes, act cleanly. I could still hear Grace whispering, you should accept that money. I could still hear Patrick saying, we don't have time to take care of someone who didn't plan ahead. If only they knew. I folded the notepad, placed it inside my wallet, and turned off the lights. For the first night in a long time, I slept. And in the darkness, one truth settled like bedrock. The betrayal was almost complete. All that was left was for them to believe I was defeated. And I wasn't going to correct them. The parking lot glimmered with polished SUVs and imported cars. Inside, the dining hall buzzed with conversations, designer perfumes and careful laughter. A banner on the wall read, to success, growth and smart choices. I spotted Patrick first. He wore a fitted navy suit, hair slicked back. He looked like a man performing wealth. Emily stood beside him in a shimmering evening dress, greeting guests as if she were royalty. Grace hovered next to them, doing damage control with her smile. When they saw me, they reacted in sync. Patrick, shock; Grace, relief; Emily, irritation. You came, Patrick said, pulling me into a one-armed hug too aggressively, like claiming territory. Of course, I replied. This is a big night for you. Emily's smile sharpened. Good. Maybe tonight can help you move on. I said nothing. The room filled until every seat was taken. People raised glasses, lights dimmed, forks chimed against glass. The manufactured moment of applause. Patrick clinked a spoon against his wine glass. Thank you all for being here. Grace and I have been blessed this year. The house sale was the last step, a huge step, toward our future. Guests whistled and clapped. Emily grinned, soaking up envy. Patrick continued, we took risks. We made sacrifices. We worked hard. And now, we're finally where we deserve to be. Then came the dig, casual to the crowd, surgical to me. And we learned something important this year. Nobody owes you success. You build it yourself. People nodded. They didn't know the target of the sermon. Emily added, and we're grateful that our family supported us, even when they didn't fully understand the world we're operating in. A few eyes drifted to me. I held my water glass and smiled politely. After dessert was served, the tone shifted from announcement to performance. Guests came by to congratulate them, to admire. Then, eventually, someone asked the question Patrick had been waiting for. So what are you two doing with the money from the house? Emily laughed dramatically. Oh, there is no shortage of plans. Luxury travel. Business investments. Upgrading vehicles. A new home, in a neighborhood more fitting for our lifestyle. With each boast, more heads turned, more reactions bubbled. I remained silent, the ghost they thought they buried. Then came the trigger. Patrick tapped his glass loudly again. Actually, there's someone very special we want to thank tonight. Every eye turned toward the head table. Dad, he said, placing deliberate emphasis on the word. Stand up. I did. Calmly. This man, Patrick continued, helped us get started years ago. He gave us a house to live in. He helped us financially, work-wise, emotionally. And we're grateful. Truly. But we also want to show that you don't need to cling to the past to succeed. You can let go. You can start fresh. He paused for effect. Isn't that right, Dad? I could feel the room leaning forward. They wanted spectacle. Patrick wanted triumph. Emily wanted humiliation. I kept my voice steady. Yes. Letting go can be very important. Patrick smirked. He thought it was a surrender. So, he said loudly, I'm glad you're here to see us win. To see what we've built. The applause started, polite, uncomfortable. Then Jonathan Mallory, a friend of Patrick's and known for poking the bear, chimed in with liquor-fueled curiosity. So Michael, what's next for you? Lot of people your age downsize. Not much retirement cushion for blue-collar guys these days, huh? The room silenced. That was the shot they expected to break me. I set my napkin on the table. Actually, I said, that's a good question. Patrick raised his chin, ready to enjoy whatever struggle I confessed. Some families divide. Some pull things away. Some hide paperwork and scrape at what they think is power, I began quietly. But others, prepare. People shifted in their seats. Emily scoffed. Oh God. Are we doing the guilt speech again? No, I said. This isn't guilt. This is clarity. I reached into my jacket, not hurried, not dramatic, and placed a slim folder on the table. Before Laura passed away, she left me 3 commercial lots off Highway 37, I said. They were never liquidated. They're fully paid. And as of last month, they were placed into a long-term trust. The room went silent, stunned, held breath, frozen. Patrick's face drained. A trust? For who? I turned to Grace. Not to Patrick. Not to Emily. For her, I said. Sole beneficiary. Gasps rippled across the tables. Grace covered her mouth with one trembling hand. Emily shot up from her chair. You can't do that. You can't just skip. I looked at her. I can't. And I did. Patrick stood now, voice cracking. Why her? Over your own son? I didn't raise mine. Because loyalty is love. And love is earned. Grace sat perfectly still, tears filling her eyes. Not greed, not excitement. Disbelief. I opened the folder slowly. No theatrics. Just truth laid bare. 3 notarized deeds. 3 signatures. 3 county approvals. All stamped, sealed, and complete, legally irreversible. I turned the documents outward for anyone who wanted to see. Dates. Authenticated signatures. Trust stamped and archived. A cluster of guests leaned in. Murmurs spread like wildfire. Emily slammed both hands on the table. This isn't fair. This is vindictive. You're punishing us. My expression didn't move. I'm matching your definition of fairness. You taught me that family deserves only what they've earned. Patrick's humiliation broke through his voice. We're your family. I was your family, I replied softly. Until you treated me like currency. He sat hard, breathing like he'd been punched. The room didn't comfort him. Not because they hated him. Because they finally saw him. Emily kept shouting, but her voice didn't reach anyone. It sounded shrill, frantic, small. Grace whispered through tears, I didn't know. I never asked for this. I nodded. That's why you're the one who deserves it. She cried harder, guilt, gratitude, shock all tangled. Patrick tried one more desperate line. Dad, please, people are watching. I met his eyes without blinking. They were always watching. You just didn't notice when the performance stopped being convincing. No anger. No vengeance. Just consequence. Patrick slumped back in his chair, stared into his wine glass like he might drown in it. Emily stood trembling, furious, trapped between outrage and shame. Grace didn't move. Silence swallowed the room. No forks, no glasses, no whispers. Then I placed the empty folder on the table and pushed back my chair. You don't have to clap for me, I told the room. You don't have to support me. You don't have to like what I did. But you will remember it, because dignity never begs. I looked at Patrick one last time. You taught me what family is now. And I'm simply returning the lesson. I turned and walked toward the exit. No one tried to stop me. As I reached the door, I heard a voice behind me, raw, terrified. Dad, please, what about us? Patrick. I didn't turn around. Take care of what you chose, I said. That's all any of us can do. And I stepped out into the cool night air, steady, calm hall. Inside the dining hall, 100 witnesses sat in heavy silence, watching the collapse of two people who finally saw what their choices had cost them. Not money. Not property. Dignity. And that's a debt that can't be paid back. After the dinner at Briar Hill, the aftermath spread quietly. No shouting, no lawsuits, no dramatic scenes on front lawns. Just consequences finding their way to where they belonged. Patrick and Emily disappeared from social circles first. Word travels fast at country clubs. People with money love gossip almost as much as money. It wasn't the trust that damaged them, it was the public exposure of how they treated their own family. You can recover from financial loss. Reputation, that's harder. Neighbors stopped dropping by. Their business partners stopped returning calls as quickly. Invitations thinned. People still smiled at them, but now it was the smile you give someone when you know too much. I didn't watch from a distance with satisfaction or spite. I lived my life. But news had its way of finding me. 3 months later, Ethan called. "You didn't hear this from me," he said, "but they are struggling. They bought a house that's too big, too flashy. Interest rates hit hard. Their plans weren't as smart as they thought." I didn't gloat. I didn't feed the gossip. I just thanked him and wished him well. Financial stress always finds cracks in a foundation. And their marriage had plenty. Arguments spilled into the open. Not screaming, whispers with sharp edges. Grace told me one afternoon, eyes tired, expression lost. They blame each other for everything. Emily blames Patrick for letting you humiliate them. Patrick blames Emily for pushing him away from you. Neither of them blames themselves. I didn't comment. I didn't want to weaponize her vulnerability. Instead, I poured her a cup of tea, the same way I did years ago when she first joined the family. She looked around my rental kitchen, swallowing emotion. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "You didn't betray me," I said. "You were standing in the middle of a storm you didn't create." Her eyes filled. She visited again the next week. And again the week after. Sometimes she talked. Sometimes she just sat in silence. Sometimes she brought groceries. Sometimes she brought stories from her childhood, as if reminding herself she still knew love. She never asked for money. Not once. She just wanted a place where kindness didn't require performance. Meanwhile, Richard handled everything quietly and professionally. He made sure every document for the trust was airtight and ethically structured. One afternoon, after signing the final paperwork, he said, "You know, Mike, you could have gone further. You could have sued for proceeds from the house sale. You could have filed for damages. Legally, you would have won." I nodded. I didn't need to win. I just needed to stop losing. He sat back, thoughtful. "Most people fight for revenge. You fought for dignity. That's rarer than you think." I chuckled softly. "Maybe I'm just tired." "No," he corrected. "You're wise." He wasn't flattering me. He meant it. It was a simple acknowledgement between two grown men who'd seen what desperation can make people do, and how restraint can be stronger than retaliation. A few weeks later, I moved into a small cottage near the edge of town, woods to the east, a lake 10 minutes away, and a workshop large enough for a table saw and a lifetime of unfinished ideas. The rent was reasonable. The peace was free. I didn't announce my move. I didn't post photos or send group messages. I just left my forwarding address with the post office and let silence be my change of address. The first visitors I had were children from the neighborhood, curious faces peeking into the workshop, asking questions about tools, wood, shapes. One of them, a shy kid named Oliver, asked, "Mister, can you teach me how to make something?" I smiled. "Sure. What do you want to make?" He thought deeply. "A box. For my mom's jewelry." A simple project. A meaningful one. Soon, more kids came. Word spread. Some parents offered to pay. I said no, just bring a piece of wood, and I'd provide the rest. It became a weekly ritual. Small hands learning to sand, glue, measure, cut. Sawdust in the air. Laughter. Concentration. Pride. One afternoon, Oliver's mother knocked on the workshop door. She held the jewelry box he made, slightly crooked, uneven stain, lit a little stubborn. "It's the most beautiful thing I own," she said, voice trembling. That meant more to me than any apology Patrick could ever give. Grace visited the cottage too. Sometimes she helped the kids. Sometimes she asked about Laura, what she was like, what she loved, what she dreamed of. I didn't talk about the past like a wound, I talked about it like a home. One evening, she stood in the doorway while the sun sank behind the trees. "Do you hate them?" she asked. "No," I replied honestly. "Hate keeps people connected." I let go. She absorbed that quietly. Then she said, almost afraid of her own voice, "Do you think they'll ever understand what they did?" "Maybe," I said. "But understanding won't repair everything. Consequences don't work like that." She nodded. No bitterness toward her husband. No excuses for him either. Just quiet acceptance that life sometimes punishes us by showing us exactly who we are. Patrick didn't visit. Not once. Whether pride stopped him, or shame, or stubbornness, I didn't know. I didn't chase him. I didn't block him either. One day, perhaps, he'll stand on my doorstep. And if he does, I'll answer. Not to fix the past, but to acknowledge it. A father's love doesn't vanish. It changes shape. People think justice looks like triumph, but sometimes justice looks like peace. I wake up now to birds instead of arguments. I smell cedar instead of expensive perfume. I measure my days in projects completed, not debts owed. I don't replay the dinner at Briar Hill. I don't rehearse speeches I never gave. The past isn't a storm anymore. It's a lesson. I didn't win because I exposed them. I won because I didn't become them. And in the end, that is the only victory that matters. 6 months passed quietly the way snow melts, without sound, without spectacle, just slowly giving shape to a different landscape. Life didn't return to the way it used to be. It settled into something gentler. Most mornings I drank coffee on the porch of the cottage, watching the light crawl across the treetops. The workshop always smelled of cedar and varnish, and the radio played softly in the background, not to fill silence but to accompany it. The world didn't feel heavy anymore. The kids kept coming to learn woodworking and I kept teaching. Projects got more ambitious. Shelves, birdhouses, benches, even a toy boat that sank the first 3 times we tested it until Oliver sealed it with too much glue and triumphantly declared it unsinkable. We laughed about that for weeks. Grace came every Saturday. At first she just sat and watched, holding her mug with both hands like she was afraid to drop it. Eventually curiosity won and she asked, "Can you teach me something too?" Something small. We started with a picture frame. She sanded the edges too hard at first and apologized every time she made a mistake. "You don't need to be perfect," I told her. "Wood forgives." She smiled, a real unguarded smile I hadn't seen from her in years. She finished the frame in 2 weeks. Inside it, she placed a photo of her and me from the early days, before the house, before the distance, before expectations took the place of affection. She gave it to me wordlessly. I hung it in the workshop. Grace didn't talk much about Patrick and I never asked. But sometimes she'd pause mid-sanding and say things like, "I didn't realize how fast pride can turn into fear." Or, "It's strange, you don't notice you're losing yourself until you're gone." She wasn't looking for answers. She was releasing ghosts. One Saturday while we worked she said, "Do you ever think about going back, not to the house but to them?" I wiped sawdust from my hands. "Healing isn't always going back," I said. "Sometimes it's staying still and letting others come to you." She absorbed that slowly as if storing it somewhere inside. Weeks later she mentioned, almost offhand, "Patrick's been asking about you a lot lately." I didn't ask what he said. I didn't ask if he was sorry. I didn't need the autopsy of the past. I just nodded. The first time Patrick came to the cottage he didn't knock. He stood halfway up the driveway, hands in his pockets, staring at the ground like a man rehearsing a sentence he couldn't quite shape. I stepped onto the porch and waited. He looked up. "Hey, Dad." "Hey, son." No tension. No warmth. Just honesty. He walked closer. Not all the way. Just enough. "I'm trying," he said. "I don't know what to say yet. But I'm trying." There was no speech. No apology wrapped in theatrics. Just a wounded man meeting the consequences of his own choices. "That's enough for today," I told him. He nodded, relieved. And when he left, there was no pain in watching him go. Healing doesn't always arrive in miracles. Sometimes it comes handmade, slow, imperfect, like the first box a child builds. He came back again a week later. And again 2 weeks after that. Never for long. Never with excuses. Sometimes we talked. Sometimes we just sat. Grace always stayed in the workshop while he visited. I didn't ask why. Maybe she was giving him space to find his own way back. Time does what anger cannot. On the 6-month mark, I stood in the doorway of the workshop watching dust float through a beam of sunlight. The world felt balanced, not fixed, not erased, just true. Grace was inside sanding the edge of a new project, a jewelry cabinet she planned to give her sister. Patrick was outside stacking firewood, awkward and determined but present. The kids would arrive in an hour. Richard had texted that morning to check in. Everything with the trust remained quiet, secure, untouched. Life didn't look like what I thought it would. It looked better, not because it was easy but because it was honest. Standing there, I realized something quietly profound. Justice hadn't come from the trust or the documents or the dinner. Justice had come from peace, from not letting someone else rewrite who I am. Respect isn't something you demand or chase. Respect is what remains when dignity never bends.